Some people who responded when I told them that I was gay years ago. Some people broke down and started crying. Other people,
oh no!
I know, oh my gosh. Other people, why didn't you tell me earlier? You should have told me earlier. All these expectations.
Yeah.
And how people kind of made it about themselves. I'm like, this is the complete opposite of what should be happening right now.
Let's repeat the non-conformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Welcome back again to Positive Blatherings, of course, brought to you by our friends at Saboteurs.com. Head over to the Bushnell's Basin store. It's one of their newest stores, and it's beautiful in there, and they make great food. The family and I always get our signature pizza every Friday. It's just been Pizza Friday for years in the Fitz household, and we're happy to have Salvatore's on board, helping spread the positivity. This season has been dominated by authors, and I like that because I'm just enamored with authors. I'm always amazed at how someone can write a book, whether it's memoirs, whether it's a narrative, whatever, poetry. Anyone that can compile their thoughts in book form, put it out there, edit it, and do all the things that you need to do to publish a book, which is not easy, as our guest will attest to. Michael Solis is here, and he is the author of Deficient. I can't see this, but I'll put it up there close. This is a really cool book. We just finished the audiobook here at ROC Vox Recording and Production. Michael, welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a long time coming, actually, because when you first came in here to talk about your audiobook and you were describing the story, I was so excited. Because traditionally here, the audiobooks that we've recorded have been memoirs, self-help type of things as read by the author. And this was an actual story. This was a narrative. This was a novel. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So, and it was really cool to listen to the story, be the first person to actually listen to the story come unfold as you read the audiobook. Where did you get the idea for Deficient?
Yeah. Well, Deficient is a long time in the making. I think I started drafting it in 2011, probably got the first draft done in 2012. And yeah, I think back to what was going on in the world in those days. I was very much kind of steeped in the world of the Hunger Games, dystopian novels. But also growing up, I was really inspired by any stories that had to do with Marvel or X-Men, especially X-Men, I think. I loved the idea of superpowers and people kind of in extraordinary circumstances. But what I was noticing in a lot of the books that I liked, Ender's Game was another book that I absolutely loved that I think has inspired my writing. A lot of the protagonists were people who were quite extraordinary. So if you think of Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, if you think of Ender's Game, even if you think of things like Harry Potter could do magic, right? Katniss was excellent with the bow. I was wondering, what would it be like for a main character who didn't have any sort of extraordinary skills or abilities, but in a world where everyone else did? Similar with X-Men, I was always intrigued by this idea of mutants having special powers, but they were a minority among a population of normal humans. So I always thought, what if you inverse that and you had a world where you had a population of superpowered individuals and a small group of people who actually were not? And what would it feel like to grow up in that type of context or to live and exist in that type of context? So that kind of spawned Deficient and a few other books after.
I noticed quite a few genius moments throughout the book, and I may lay it on a little thick in this episode, but I honestly believe it because, well, first of all, you've weaved in a lot of very modern concepts and modern themes into the book, LGBTQ and just the idea of people who are different trying to get along with people who don't understand them and frankly don't want to understand them. And that was a part that really hit home for me. But also I identified with the main character because I don't have any superpowers, or at least I don't see myself as having any. I mean, we all have our own superpowers, right? But I see everybody else, especially with social media these days, I see everybody else like doing all this cool stuff. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything, And so I can identify with that and how that character felt about feeling deficient, feeling like everybody else has got all this great stuff and I'm just here, I'm just alive, So it was really cool to be able to identify with the main character in a way that I didn't expect to.
Yeah, well, you definitely have a superpower. You run the studio, and this is something I would never, ever be able to do. That was part of what brought me here. Everyone tells you, oh, you can just record your own audiobook at home and just go into a closet and surround yourself with clothing or whatever. And I actually tried it. It was embarrassing. I was like stuck in the closet, literally. I was like, no, I can't do this. I need to find someone who actually knows what they're doing. But I think, we all have felt that experience, I think, of feeling like the other, or that we are inadequate in some way, or that we can't do something. There's a lot of comparing on social media as well, and always a sense of inadequacy, right? Maybe some people don't feel that way, right? But I think that was something that spoke to me as well. And I thought about my own childhood growing up as a young queer person, in a house that was homophobic, in a town that was homophobic, in a school that was homophobic, and an overall society that was quite homophobic. And it was really hard to see where to turn for support. So I think Deficient can be an allegory for anyone who has experienced something similar to that, right? Mm-hmm. So queerness could be one form of that expression. Ableism and that, the experience of persons living with disabilities, for instance, whatever it might be, right? Yeah. Or just growing up or being in a situation where you do feel different from others. And I think the main character, Ale, who is a 15-year-old boy, he's the only deficient in his school, grows up in a context that is really challenging. And I think having lived through that experience of, these caste systems and these hierarchies that we create as humans to, divide each other basically and discriminate against each other, I was also wondering what would life look like several hundred years into the future if, say, we got over the things that divide us now around race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. What if we did progress, right? But if humans were to fundamentally change on another level, say genetics and our abilities, how would humans respond? Would we be loving and warm and harmonious? Or would we just do the same crap that we've always done? So I kind of went with the latter because maybe I'm cynical. But I think that makes for a richer, more realistic story as well.
I agree, and I think that's right. I didn't even think about that angle of it, but all of these things happen to the human race, and now everybody's got all these powers, and they're still as divided as they ever were. It's just different subjects.
Yeah, the characters don't care what they look like. They don't care about the skin color, or they don't care about sexual. All that's gone, right? But the caste system is based now about the ability that you have, or in the case of Ale, the ability that you don't have. So the main abilities are like, super strength and flight, the things you think about, mind reading, invisibility, telekinesis. If you have those sort of standard abilities, you typically have one. You're socially accepted, so you're part of the cool group. If you have more than one ability, you're extra special, but you're almost like a lone wolf because you're so rare, and you're also seen as a little bit too special. So those, they're called legions, are kind of off doing their own thing. Ferals is an interesting category. It's people who kind of have a wild card ability that doesn't fit into the standard abilities. And they're abilities that are not often seen as useful. So those people are seen as a little bit freakish, a little bit weird, a little bit odd, and they're not as socially accepted. And the lowest level on that rung of the ability ladder would be deficiency of not having an ability, which is very rare. Yeah. But in the case of the protagonist, that's what Ale is going through. And
where did you come from? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in New Jersey. The wonderful state of New Jersey, a very, very exotic land. So it's only about a 4-hour drive from Rochester. And my father's background, he's Mexican-American from Texas. So he grew up on the Texan-Mexican border. So we have a lot of family still even in Texas. But most of my life was spent in New Jersey.
I can now, I don't want to paint a broad stroke with your family, but with saying that you're Mexican American coming from Texas, now I can understand the homophobia just from a general of what I know of Texas recently anyway, from Texas being in the news. It's like that must have been really hard growing up in a house like that.
Yeah. And I think, eventually when I came out to my parents, that was, I think, right after college, right? So I'd come out to friends during college and that type of thing over time. But eventually, I was like, I have to talk to my parents about this. And it was so annoying and awkward. I was, why do we have to perform this ritual of coming out, right? But I remember when I told my dad, he was, my parents, I love them to death and they're amazing people. I think they flopped on the response of, what not to do when a child comes out. I think, and I think they would admit that now of like, oh gosh, if I could turn back time.
Sure.
But my dad did say, the first thing he was like, well, I'm not going to tell anyone in my family about it. And I was like, well, I don't really care. I don't see them. And if they wouldn't accept me for who I am, fine, right? I don't want to associate with them anyway. But actually, I think over time, there was an instance where my dad actually went back to Texas, and one of my cousins, who is very evangelical, said something about, hatred against homosexuals. And my dad stood up to him and really kind of laid his foot down and defended, me in a way, and came back and told me about that. And I was really proud of him. And so I think my parents have come a very long way. And I like that aspect of these structures and castes because there is room for growth. There is room for change. Some characters will never change, right? And some will. So there's also an element of giving grace to people, giving grace to the bullies in the book, right? Who maybe will change over time. So I like having that opportunity for people to be able to change in difficult contexts when they inherit what they're taught. And I think my dad inherited a lot from being from Texas, being, from a conservative family, being Mexican, being Catholic. And my mother's family also, I think, inherited their own, whatever they inherited in terms of their beliefs. So I think, it was a challenge, but I think we were able to overcome that.
I'm glad. I'm glad because that's not a common tale. I mean, I guess maybe it's becoming more common, which I think is a good thing, but it's still. So my middle child is trans, and when he told us that he was transitioning, it was at the age of 15.
Yeah.
And so that's why another reason with this book, I was wondering what made you decide to make them adolescents? Was there a specific reason, or was it just easier for the story and for the collection of characters and how they interacted? Or was there a more personal reason on why they were adolescents?
Yeah, I mean, I started reading this in my 20s, and I think my adolescence was a little bit closer to my lived experience than definitely it is now. But I felt that was such an interesting time of life. There's so much going on. There's so much tumultuousness in the atmosphere, in our minds. There's a lot happening in terms of our relationships with others, wanting to be accepted, really wanting to belong, and not totally really knowing who we are ourselves yet. And so we're on that journey of self-discovery in a really challenging time and context. Our friends mean a lot to us, and particularly for someone like Ale, who doesn't have friends. He only has one friend who's really willing to be his friend, and is his friend really, an intense best friend, right? Yolamba, how meaningful that relationship was. And I was always someone who got really close to people on an individual level. I wasn't someone who had massive, I wasn't definitely not the popular kid, but really those close connections to people. And when you are different, you trust others perhaps less, and you confide in others in different ways. And so those close proximate relationships, I think, were really important for me. And so I really tapped into that. And the person who I dedicated the book to was my best friend growing up, and is still one, my best friend now, and someone who means a lot in my life, and also someone who overcame many of the challenges that she experienced in her adolescent times. So those journeys are so raw, and I wanted to tap into that through the characters, and they all have the sense of rawness to them. I think that comes through in the book as well.
And now the Spanish makes sense to me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not just Spanish. There's
got German in there too.
Yeah.
And
it is like a Latinx family is Ale's family. But it's kind of a future world where it's like, okay, how would things change? Like, would we be cursing the same way? And so actually all of the curses are in foreign languages or words adapted from foreign languages.
I liked that. I thought that was a really cool touch. And so is the genre considered young adult?
Yeah, I think it would be young adult. It's targeted towards, adolescents like 13 and up. But what I found is that there's excellent crossover into adults who just love the book, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because Yeah, we kind of create these genres of, okay, if you're a young adult, you're this and you will only like this. If you're adult, you're this and you will only like this. But I think we actually, as different as we are as age groups, there's so much that unifies us, I think, and we all have that shared experience of having gone through adolescence at different points in time, dealing with different challenges. But I think even as adults, we can kind of go back in time. And there was one person who read, Rob Costello, who's an excellent writer, read the book, and he just said, this book made me feel things that I haven't felt in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think it sends you back to that time when we were younger and what we went through. And it's changed, it's manifested. And I think, with the experience now as a father of a trans person, understanding the scope of what it looks like and what that person, what your own child feels like now, right? Feeling different in a society that is not ready for and welcoming and celebratory of trans people, unfortunately.
And coming from a conservative family, a conservative Catholic family, Irish Catholic, with the same ideas that probably you were growing up with. Now, it's my parents have since come to terms with the situation, but there's still some slip-ups. They still say she on occasion, or it took my father a long time to actually say his name and not his dead name. So it was definitely a task. It was a journey, but I tried to be patient, and I tried to, it was a lot for me to and I consider myself a very progressive person.
Yeah.
But until it hits you personally, because I didn't realize that I had to mourn what I saw as the loss of my daughter.
Yeah.
And who I saw her as at the time. And, I'm over that now. I love my son. I love him for who he is and who he's become. I don't want to get, I'm going to get teared up here. He's just a really amazing person, and is so much happier in who he is than who he was. And that to me was the most important part of it, everything. It was like, we would get to the point where what do you care? What do you care about how he expresses his gender?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with you. The thing that you need to worry about is he okay? Is he happy? Does he feel good about himself? That's the important part. And I think so many people miss that because they get hung up on the societal norms or whatever has been beaten into our heads over years and years of whatever, schooling and everything else and expectations. And it's so much easier and simple than that,
Yeah. And I think, we're so conditioned, right? It's so hard to break from those, to learn the new vocabulary, right? But also the new rules around respect and how do we respect others and their identities and who they are as people, right? And I think back to even my own experience of, some people who responded when I told them that I was gay years ago. Some people broke down and started crying. Other people,
oh no!
I know, oh my gosh. Other people, why didn't you tell me earlier? You should have told me earlier. All these expectations.
Yeah.
And how people kind of made it about themselves. I'm like, this is the complete opposite of what should be happening right now. My best friend in college, she, when I told her, and we had an interesting background. But when she knew, and I knew she knew. But by the time I finally told her, she just looked at me and said, Michael, you're beautiful. And I had never heard that before. And I had never, she was one of the few that, responded that way. And I wanted to incorporate that into the book somehow, that sense of, you are who you are. I see you. You are beautiful. And I think if we could just respond to each other more in that regard, rather than thinking about the expectations or the vision that we've had for someone that has maybe broken, and how that impacts us, actually admiring and celebrating the person before us. And
Deficient is a part one of a 4-part series, is that correct?
Yes, so there are 4 books. So I've just a few weeks ago finished the final book. So I have to revise that and edit that, and I work with my editors around that as well. So I'm re-releasing the book because Deficient actually came out in 2023. It was published by another press, but the press closed over last summer. So I ended up getting the book rights back to Deficient. And that was an opportunity to revisit the text, to edit the text again, not changing the story really dramatically, but refining the writing and working with another copy editor to go through it one more time. And the book was previously recorded by a voice actor, which was excellent. But this time around, I thought, it would be great if I could record it in my own voice. I really love listening to audiobooks where the authors themselves are reading their own work, because they're tapping into, what they've created, their own characters. They can tell the story in a unique way. And as challenging as it was for me to do that and to create voices for the different characters, I wanted to see how it would go, which is essentially why I wanted to tell the story. So I'll be re-releasing the book next month, hopefully by June 15th. And then I hope to release the new book, the second book of the series, which is called Feral Rising, by October. And then hopefully the third and fourth book in 2027.
And when did the project start out as a 4-part series, or did it just evolve into that?
In my mind, it was always going to be a series. But early on, as I was pitching it to agents, and I did have a literary agent for a while who represented the book, and we were trying to pitch it to the top 5 publishers, et cetera. The big thing for agents is often, okay, make sure that the first book is a standalone, because it's easier to sell it as a standalone novel. It could have series potential, and you could write a series. But say if it doesn't take off, we won't commit ourselves to a full series. And there are some challenges with series, right? Your readership trickles off over time. It doesn't necessarily mean if you write a series that the second, third, or fourth book will sell as well as the first book, for instance.
Right.
But in my brain, I was like, well, there's so much potential here for this story. And I saw a bigger picture beyond. The first book really takes place in the town of Achawan, in the school, Achawan Academy, and in the surroundings, right? Whereas book 2 takes you beyond. They're in this prefecture, is what we call the kind of geographical region where they are. And it kind of takes you a bit beyond the prefecture, so you see the bigger picture of what's going on in the society.
I made, I don't know if this is correct, but I made some connections to Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Because, do you remember? Because they were all speaking perfect English, but they were in Argentina, or they were in Buenos Aires, and it was just like the future world there was not as geographically separated by, states and countries and stuff. Yeah. It was more of a global idea. And so that's what I kind of felt that when you were reading it, that it was kind of like the way society has evolved. It's more of like more of a global society as opposed to different countries and things like that. Yeah. But they still maintained the old traditions in the languages.
Yeah. So I kind of, the way I sort of did it, I took a world map and I just divided it into these square, quadrants basically, or just squares, and called them prefectures. So it is it's a new world order. There have been several disasters. There's been this great catastrophe that has reduced the world population. Humans have recovered from that. So in a way, it feels a bit post-apocalyptic in that sense. Climate change has had its impact. So the world has completely restructured. So it's just squares basically, and you're in a prefecture. Each square is called a prefecture, and the prefectures are actually bound by these very hard borders, so it's not possible for people to leave or cross the borders easily. You would need a very high level permission to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Book 1 doesn't really get into that as much, but you see that in book 2, where the characters actually come to the border and it's impossible to cross. So it's interesting to play with that a little bit more, of why did the system evolve this way? Yeah. Who is controlling it? And how do characters engage in such a context?
Would you consider yourself a very organized person? I see you as very organized. You seem to me like very put together and things, where things are going to go and how to. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not very organized.
I would say, in a way, I'm organized. I think in my writing, in this book, for instance, I didn't do really any outlining, right? And
that's interesting.
They call it plotting and pantsing, right? Yeah. So do you plot the book in every detail beforehand, or do you pants and kind of make it up as you go? I think I had an overarching idea and vision, but I really let the book almost write itself. And I think even certain characters emerged from that process. Like there's a character called Kazuki, who I know you really liked. Yeah. Kazuki Tanaka, who I had no idea from the start that he would be in the book. But I got to the scene that takes place in a bathroom where Ale is getting bullied. And I really wanted to be like, well, I want the bully to sort of be able to infiltrate Ale's mind, but the bully can't do that. He has super strength. So how would he do that? He would have to actually use a character that could read Ale's mind and almost bully that character to get the thoughts from Ale that he's seeking, right? So then Kazuki kind of materialized, and he's this really cool, quirky character. He's a year younger than the protagonist, and he can turn invisible, and he can also read minds. So he's a legion, which sets him in that kind of special category. But everyone underestimates him, and they all think he's a mind reader, and they kind of forget that he can turn invisible as well. Yeah, and he gets things wrong. Like he can read minds, but he struggles that he confuses when people are speaking and when they're actually thinking. So he's always blurting out things that he shouldn't be saying. He's not catching into social cues. He's committing all these social faux pas, and he's extremely quirky. So he was a really fun character to write.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like there was a bit of like autism overtones with him.
Readers have pointed that out, right?
Yeah.
Because Kazuki doesn't really make eye contact with other characters. He struggles to retain eye contact. Is not really always aware of what's going on around him or how other characters respond to what he says or thinks, right?
Yeah, the social cues were kind of lost on him at times.
Kids love him. So kids are like, he's always the favorite character of kids.
That makes sense on why I like him so much.
Yeah, and he's a risk taker as well, right? He's very, he's an excellent friend, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think also with that, I think Ale learns a lot from Kazuki because Kazuki doesn't have many friends himself. He doesn't have other friends because he's committing all these social faux pas. He can read other people's minds, so people don't really want to be around him to begin with. But then he'll just blurt out whatever you're thinking immediately, so people do stay away from him. So it is interesting when he meets Ale that there a connection forms, and Ale can kind of see, hey, well, it's not just me who's having this horrible existence in this high school. This accelerated individual who has 2 superpowers is really struggling as well in his own way.
I always gravitate towards stories that have a brotherhood, sisterhood type of theme. Band of Brothers is one of my favorite series and books. It's just I'm also a World War II buff, so that makes that why that's so. But there is a camaraderie, there is a connection between all of the characters. Same with Tolkien's books, the Hobbits, and also a lot of the films that I like. There's like Hell on Wheels is a show that I really, really enjoyed from AMC, and there's these unlikely connections between characters, and their bond becomes so strong that they, it's one of those things where they know deep down that this person has their back. And I think growing up, I never had that. I never had really good friends that I could trust. Like, I was always getting screwed over by my friends when I was younger. Like, these 2 guys would end up being palling around, and then they would like come and steal my bike or something, and I'd be like, what the hell? And then the next day they're like, hey, let's hang out. And it was just very confusing time. And so I grew up not knowing that closeness of a good friend. And I've always been amazed by people who can write memoirs and talk about their 12-year-old to 15-year-old time span in their life where they had these good friends, and they recall all these amazing things that they did and these situations. And I'm like, I can remember like this much from when I was that age, like 4 things. That's about it. So I'm always amazed that anyone could remember that stuff. But I think that was the part that I really enjoyed about Deficient, was the closeness between the main characters, and maybe some of them didn't start out that way, but they ended up that way. And there was that bond that I really connected with, that I liked.
Yeah, and I tried my best to weave. This is not a memoir, right? But it's, in a way, try to tap into that, who I was at that age and the connections that I had. So thinking of Ale and his best friend Yolamba, some of the experiences that they share were actually things that I experienced as a young person. So I think there's a scene, in the beginning where Ale's reflecting on when he met Yolamba. I think they were in like 2nd or 3rd grade. They're rolling dice in class. They spell out, a word with the dice. They start laughing. The teacher sends them to opposite corners. So something like that actually happened with me. And so I said, okay, I kind of want to incorporate that into the book, and weaving in those personal experiences actually adds depth to the characters. And it strengthens the friendship between Ale and Yolamba. Yeah. And I think the challenge for someone like Ale is if he has only one friend and this is the one person and really in the world, probably, besides his mother, who really loves him, what will happen if you take her away from him? And she ends up disappearing in a hate crime against her ability type. And it ends up becoming sort of a whodunit mystery. And Ale is blamed. He has to figure out what happened to Yolamba. Where did she go? And it's a challenge for him. Yeah, the rock, the center of his existence, is taken away.
I would love to see this as a Netflix series.
So would I. Do you know anyone?
I don't. Wish I did, but you never know. You never know. I don't know. I could just see this like just being brilliant. The special effects alone from what these characters can do is interesting enough. But then the characters themselves are so interesting in the way they interact. I think it would be a really good series. I'm looking forward to the future books.
Yeah.
But speaking of books, I wanted to kind of transition into what you do for a living, apart from being an author, and that is you are the executive director of Writers and Books. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And Writers and Books is a wonderful resource that we have here in Rochester for authors and for generally smart people if they know about Writers and Books. Tell us what Writers and Books is.
Yeah, so Writers and Books is a literary nonprofit organization. It's on 740 University Ave, so it's the big 3-story historic building there. There's a big, gigantic yellow pencil in front and a poetry phone booth out in front as well. And we offer, basically what we do is we promote reading and writing as lifelong practices for people of all ages. So we offer creative writing programs for adults. We have opportunities for readers to connect with authors. We offer youth programs to young people all year long. We also run summer write camps, so camps focused on the literary arts and creativity all summer long, which is also really exciting for ages 7 to 17. We have a literary arts retreat center, a creative retreat center out in South Bristol, Naples area called GEL. And we do writing residencies there, team retreats and those types of things. It's really beautiful property on 24 acres of land.
Nice.
And then every year we bring lots of authors to, and celebrate lots of authors throughout the year. But we do something called Rochester Reads, which is a one-book initiative. So we select one author, we promote their book, we try to get as many people in the city to read the books, and we'll be having a special event to mark the 25th anniversary of Rochester Reads in November this year with 2 authors, with Sonia Livingston and Omar El-Akkad, who wrote One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, which just won the National Book Award, and Sonia wrote Ghost Bread, and many other books. Both have written many books, but those are the 2 books that we have chosen this year for Rochester Reads.
And are they Rochester authors, or are they just authors that you like?
So usually for Rochester Reads, they could be from anywhere.
Okay.
Sonia is from the area, and her book is about growing up in poverty throughout upstate Western New York, and her experiences as a young person moving from place to place, grappling with a really tough reality, right? And Omar is Egyptian, grew up in Canada, now lives in the U.S., and we'll be bringing him in from Washington State to join us.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
I have I found an author that I really enjoy. His name is Alan Eskins. He's from Minnesota, and he writes these sort of kind of courtroom detective murder mystery novels that, because he was a former defense attorney and kind of really enjoyed writing stories, and he ended up writing these books, and now he's doing really well writing these books. I had him on the last season of The Blathering, and it was one of my not one of my prouder moments, because I kind of fanboyed the whole time.
Like, oh my gosh.
It was over Zoom, and I kept losing my train of thought, because I'm like, the guy said, because I reached out, I'm like, hey, would you be on my podcast? Thinking this guy's he doesn't care. And he was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, so I was talking to him, and just because of the way my format is for this podcast, it's just kind of like willy-nilly, seat of my pants type of thing, where we just have a conversation. And I had so many things that I wanted to talk to him about with the different books. He's written a lot of books, and a lot of them are series that have, certain characters that are through lines throughout the different books. And so I was just all over the place.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a comment on YouTube saying, that was a painful interview. And I was like, oh man, was it really? I felt really bad. But I am an audiobook person now.
Yeah.
I love stories. I used to love reading. I don't love reading anymore. And I think it's more of a personal thing. Like when I sit down, and maybe it's time, maybe it's I'm not making enough time, but when I sit down and I want to start reading a book, my mind wanders or I start getting tired. And so I've moved away from actually physically reading a book to listening to audiobooks when I'm doing busy work. And that just seems to suit me better. So I have hundreds and hundreds of titles under my belt through Audible, and I'm constantly, I probably listen to 2 or 3, maybe 4 audiobooks a month.
Yeah.
Depending on how big they are.
And you're not the only one. I mean, that's why audiobooks have grown so much over the past several years, right? And it's the way people are reading and consuming information. And I think because our society has changed so much, right? And I think for young people and for adults, we are all struggling to... Reading requires sitting in a location, only having a book in your hands, not being distracted by technology, not being distracted by everything that's going on around us, and focusing for a sustained period of time, right? Quietly, which is not something that is easy to do these days, right? Even in many schools, schools are kind of moving away from teaching full-length novels because of that ability to sustain one's attention over time is trickling away, right? And
what do you think about that?
I think it's very sad.
Yeah, because some of my greatest memories of school, especially high school, was I had a teacher that was very passionate about books and about stories, and that came through to me, and it really, I wanted to be a writer back then. I used to write short stories and different things like that, and it just sort of fell away over the years. But that was one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about the programs you have at Writers and Books, because I was like, well, maybe I can go and take a creative writing class and start maybe trying to hone my skills and actually go after that idea that that's been knocking around in my head for 20 years.
Yeah. And someone like Sonia Livingston, who is our Rochester Reads author this year, and was a previous Rochester Reads author, took her first class, her writing class at Writers and Books, right? And she's had this amazing career, and it's wonderful to see the journey that she's been on. A lot of people come to Writers and Books and are like, well, I haven't been reading in a long time, or I used to write and it's, haven't done it. And there's almost a little bit of trepidation or fear to get back into doing it. But we just say, come, have the experience. You can take part in a class. You might leave the class having written a poem or two. You might leave the class having written a new short story. You might have sparked something within you that you didn't know was there. And people can come from every level of experience. So if people have never written in their lives, or if they've written book or several books already, they're more than welcome to come because we're always learning and we're always growing. And many of the classes weave in reading as well, right? So some of the teaching artists will present examples of work or snippets from books or recommend books. We have a little indie bookstore called Ampersand Books within Writers and Books as well. So some people will go to their creative writing class and then go peruse books at the store and then, pick up a book off the shelf. We have a display of all of the 25 books from the past 25 years of Rochester Reads there as well. So I'm challenging myself this year to try to read as many of those books as possible because they're just so rich and so well written, and amazing stories from authors like Octavia Butler, N.K. Jemisin, people who have been, Ann Patchett, who have been through Rochester, who have been at Writers and Books, who visited this wonderful city and shared their artwork with us, right? And I find reading a book is so inspiring. And when I finish an actual physical book and I'm reading it, I feel very like I've accomplished something. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But audiobook, I would just say, if audio is the way, then go for it. I think any way that we consume material or read material, audiobook, some people are a little bit, more like, oh, that doesn't count as reading. For me, I totally believe it does. So I think if that's the way that we consume, we often do audio as we're doing other things as well, right? Because it's okay, I can read and get things done at the same time.
Right, like when I'm doing the kitchen, which I don't want to do, but that kind of stuff, or anything that's busy work, I always have an audiobook on. Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to do that in a very busy world and climate, right? When it's hard to find that quiet time just to read. So.
I've often heard authors, writers say, if you're gonna write, here's a list of authors that you have to read. Do you have a list like that, or do you believe that there is a list like that, like something that's universal, that if you're going to be writing, you need to read this person and this person and this person? Or is it more based on the genre and what you plan to write?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of books that have had a huge impact on my life, anything by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Toni Morrison, but I would be hard pressed to say you must read these authors and these voices, and if you don't, you will not be able to write yourself, right? I think there's really a beauty in discovery, sometimes just pulling a book off the shelf and giving that author a chance and that book a chance. I love getting recommendations from others as well. At Writers and Books, I just love meeting authors and then reading their work, and many of these pieces would be books that I would not have read had I not met them in person, right? So yeah, I wouldn't be someone who would give you a list and say you must read these 10 authors. Maybe I could say, okay, these are some of my favorite books that I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
What are the ones that you've enjoyed?
Right.
Also genre. I think that for young people too, if I do anything in schools, I'll often ask, who here likes reading? And you often get very few hands, right? Because reading feels like something they've been forced to do, or they're forced to read, perhaps a literary genre that they don't feel immediately drawn to or comfortable with. But then if you ask them about, comics or graphic novels, more hands will go up. Or if you talk about television, and all the hands will go up, or movies, and all of that is created from words, right? That will start as a screenplay, right? Or a script. So I think people understand that what we like to do at Writers and Books is help people understand that there are so many different types of art forms in the literary arts that you can enjoy. And I love when people gravitate towards what they like and love, and also having curiosity around other types to see, if you're not used to reading mystery, maybe try one out and see what it's like. Or horror, and, take a dip into horror and see what you think about that type of book. I also love books that weave genres and help to expose people to different types of things. Yeah.
Some of my greatest memories of reading have been from books that I just picked up not knowing anything about it, which is kind of brave for me, because especially now, it's like if it doesn't automatically pique my interest, then it's like, I don't know if I want to devote the time. But there's been quite a few times in the past where I've said, I have no idea I'm just going to read this book. And every time, that was a really good book. I would have never picked that up for any reason based on, based on the author. I've never heard of the author. I've never heard of the title, the book cover, whatever. So I think that's really good advice and I like how you're trying to go through and read all the 25 books from what is it called? Rochester
Reads.
Rochester Reads. That's a really great idea. And I've had people in the past, former college professors and teachers and stuff, that have had their, top 50, their reading list. And I've always been interested in that. And there's a lot of books on there that are kind of consistent throughout, and the classics, like there's always Hemingway, there's always Vonnegut's one of my favorites. I absolutely love Kurt Vonnegut's books. He's one of the few authors where I've read pretty much all of his books. That's rare for me. And the interesting thing is I tried to get some Vonnegut audiobooks, because I was like, I'd love to, because he's very just kind of out there, and I didn't like any of the audiobooks.
Okay, how come?
I didn't like how they were. I didn't like the narration. That was pretty much it. I didn't like. There was something about the narrator's voice that bugged me. There was something about the way they read it that bugged me. It was too slow. Which I know you can speed it up, but it's not the same. If the pacing is slow to begin with, and then you speed it up, it just sounds weird to me. It doesn't sound natural, and like some of them had like just weird mouth sounds. And there's a lot of technical reasons why I didn't like the books, and I was so crestfallen about that. I was really excited. I'm like, I love these Vonnegut books. I'm excited to listen to these audiobooks, and was so let down that I didn't like them. And
I got a friend's book recently and listened to it, and it ended up being one of those AI artificial intelligence voices. And I was like, I persevered and read through it, but I really had to kind of speed it up. So at least it was human voices you were listening to, even if they had mouth sounds. But I guess that helps you as well, because you're more conscious of, okay, as you're recording authors' audiobooks, how do you remove those noises and sounds? And doing it myself, you realize how many noises and sounds you make, right? Which is kind of embarrassing. And when you have to retake certain things, and how challenging it is to record an audiobook. But I think that's influenced your practice as well, in terms of how you help authors to bring their books to life.
Let's go back right before the gurgle, and we'll redo that sentence. I know it's kind of interesting. We've heard a lot of interesting noises come through the booth, and so hopefully I didn't you weren't too embarrassed by that. It's an interesting experience when it happens to you. I don't particularly like being in the booth when there's someone engineering for me.
Yeah.
When I'm reading, because I just get really nervous. Believe it or not, I've been doing this for 30 years, doing various voiceovers and voice acting. And I still, when I get on there, I'm like, I don't want, because I've always got that fear that I'm being judged. The person behind the glass is judging me. And I know I don't judge anyone when I'm in the engineering seat, because I've been in there being judged and I don't like it. So I'm like, hopefully your experience was really chill and welcoming.
Yeah, you kind of have to put insecurities. We're all insecure in our own ways, right?
Yeah.
And I found myself in that situation having just to put that aside and be like, okay, I have to trust this person.
Yeah.
You really know what you're doing, right? And even little things that we do that we don't realize, we're reading our own words that we created, but sometimes we'll skip a word or replace a word or mispronounce a word or whatever. And it was really helpful that you were able to be like, hey, you missed that one. Let's go back, and catch it. And to try to maintain the integrity of the original text as well, because we are humans and we make mistakes. So I think I viewed it as a collaborative partnership.
Yeah.
But I did have to kind of get past that and be like, okay, I'm going to mess up at times, many times. And we just have to, get over it and move on. Yeah.
What would be some advice to someone who has always wanted to write and now really wants to take that first step?
Yeah, I think that's great. If you have a journal, I would say, get a journal, crack it open and start noticing, observing, writing. Even if it feels boring, if you're just recounting what you did that day, try to delve into how it made you feel, what you're going through. Just get words onto a page, even if it's a paragraph, right? And just get used to that practice of creating words, right? Maybe read a good book again, or revisit a book that you read once before that might inspire you. Creative writing classes are great, and I think they can be really intimidating because you might feel, my very first creative writing class was in college, and it was taught by Joyce Carol Oates, which is, it was pretty crazy that I did that. I was 19 years old, and it felt like everyone else in the class had done creative writing before. Like they knew how it worked. They knew how to weave a story. They knew how to do the critiquing, whereas I was completely new and felt, very behind everyone. And it wasn't necessarily an atmosphere that was welcoming of that newness, right, and freshness, and perhaps someone who was very naive. And I think the beauty of writers and books is that it's a really positive environment, that we're very celebratory of what people create. And there's a way to provide constructive feedback, right? And to provide supportive feedback to someone. And we have a lot of people who come to our workshops. Then we have, quarterly open mic nights that we have. And it's wonderful just to see people sharing their work that they've created. And it's brilliant work. And I think also being, forgiving, like the first drafts that we create are meant to be messy. They're meant to be sloppy. They're called rough drafts for a reason. They're rough. And the revision and editing process is its own art form as well. And when you see a book is created with a community, right? There are editors behind the book. It's gone through so many revisions and drafts, right, to get to where it is. So it's not like we are these perfect little writers who spew perfect words all the time. And now we have to think about artificial intelligence, because it's easy to create words with the use of AI, right? So what we're trying to do at Writers and Books is really promote authentic human creativity as much as we can. We hope this is not a dying art form or a dying practice, and we really want to create those spaces where people are together, where they can support each other in their craft. And it's great. People form writing groups, they form book clubs, they form community, and that's a way that you can help grow over time.
Yeah, and I think the community aspect of Writers and Books is where it's really important, because AI definitely is one of those. It's a great tool when you use it, for whatever you're using it for. But I can see how it has been kind of overused, and a lot of people are. You see the videos on YouTube where they're like, I'm making $1,000 an hour on Audible because I had ChatGPT make this book and turned my book into whatever. It's all just generated, and there's no humanity in that. And there's no community in that. When you have people getting together, talking about a story that someone wrote, or talking about each other's stories and stuff, that connection is, I think, so valuable. And the more we use AI and tools like that, I feel like it's just going the opposite way.
Yeah, and I think post-pandemic and with AI, one of the key things that people were asking of us at Writers and Books is do more creative writing workshops, have more spaces where we can come together in person.
Yeah.
We want to be together. We want to be part of this community, right? So I think as long as that demand is there, we will have to keep doing what we're doing and to create those spaces because, yeah, they're dwindling, right? And I think another piece of advice is, not to be afraid to share your work, especially if you're new at writing, right? I still remember the first thing that I shared. I was petrified to share my long first draft of a former novel, with a friend. And I know it was rough, right? But that friend responded with such editorial grace and really engaged with the text and gave me a lot of great food for thought. But it really broke that barrier of that insecurity I had to share the work. From then on, it was like a floodgate was released where I was just less fearful and more open to the constructive feedback that I was getting. And I think when we get feedback, it's great. You can take it on board if you like it and it resonates, and you don't necessarily have to if it doesn't. I've worked with some people who are very, they reject they might be more guarded around it and I'm not going to change that. I'm just going to leave it the way it is, which is fine too. But we also have to be open to other people's perspectives, especially if you're getting kind of repeat feedback from multiple people. It might be something you want to look at in terms of how you approach your editing process.
You definitely have to have a thick skin when you're in the creative arts of any kind, whether you're a painter or a sculptor or a writer or anything that you're creating music. There's always going to be people who don't particularly care for what you've done. Yeah. And you kind of have to say, all right, well, it's not for everybody and move on. And there's a fine line in taking constructive criticism to heart and maybe making some changes to saying, well, you know what, I really believe in this, so this is how it's going to stay.
Yeah. And I think for writers, even well-established writers, there's rejection all the time. If you're trying to get a literary agent, there's a lot of rejection leading up to that. And if you're trying to get your book published by a publisher, there's a lot of rejection leading up to that. Many famous authors have faced rounds and rounds of rejection for their, books that are now considered classics, right? And I think for my own journey, having been through literary agencies, having had a publisher and having left that publisher or that publisher closing, it almost brought me to the point where bringing my own world back into the world after I've gotten my rights back to it, I just decided to establish my own press, my own imprint called Mintaka Press. And that's how I'm releasing Deficient and its sequels now to the world. So it's nice to kind of bypass that whole process of rejection, right?
Yeah.
But I've been through a lot of rejection leading up to this point. And I think that's informed my ability to be able to run my own imprint and bring my work back into the world the way that I want it to be released.
Would you say that perhaps it's not necessary for people to try to get a literary agent like it used to be?
I think it depends on the path you want to take. Typically, if you want to see your book published by a big, the big four, or the largest publishers, you would need an agent to represent you and to pitch your book towards those publishers. Now, it might take a very different form. You might lose some of your creative control. There are pros and cons to all those options, but you might get greater distribution to a larger, wider audience. Self-publishing has really skyrocketed, right? And so there are a lot of people who swear by now, I'm just going to be self-publishing going forward and do it myself and bypass the barriers to entry into the creative arts. With self-publishing, there's also more people doing it because of artificial intelligence. So for readers being cognizant of what is real and what is not, it's hard and it's getting harder. So how to determine, what is good, what to give a try, there's a lot on the market now. So it's challenging, but you don't necessarily need a literary agent, but I guess it's understanding what are your goals and what are you willing to do. What I found with Deficient was trying to bring a book that has been formally published by another publisher. Most literary agents and other publishers wouldn't want to touch it because it's already been out and exposed to the world, right? So there's a challenge there as well if you're trying to reintroduce something that was formally published. But yeah, every journey is different. So I think, it's good to give everything a try and see how it works. And if the traditional path is not working out, or if you just prefer to self-publish, you can go forth with that path and conquer.
I've really enjoyed listening to other authors talk about their self-publishing journey. What was the biggest challenge that you faced when you were deciding to self-publish?
I think just understanding the sheer scope and scale of the work involved. So before coming to Rochester, I worked for 20 years in the humanitarian sector, and I was working in Sierra Leone and Kenya and Latin America. So I had a really intense job and professional life, responding to emergencies like Ebola, mudslides, floods, fires.
Oh my goodness.
So writing was always something I did on the side as kind of a passion project. And I didn't have the time or headspace to even think about publishing, marketing, that side of the house and everything that goes into it, cover design, all that kind of stuff. Nor did I have the contacts to be able to say, I want to reach out to this cover artist to work on this. I really needed someone to help do all of that aspect, the administrative aspect of the work for me, to help me publish the book and bring it out into the world. Now that I'm in the United States and working kind of in the literary space and have more headspace for this and am living more in this world of the literary arts, it feels like it makes more sense, and I'm carving out the time to do that myself. I've also learned a lot of lessons from, my previous publishing experience of what not to do, and how, how publishers should and should not work with authors, and mistakes not to make, right? So I think it felt like now it made sense. I was also a little bit afraid of it. You're taking a risk. You're creating your own business. You're trying to promote work. And hopefully down the line, I'll be able to publish other people's work too. But I feel like I'm learning through Deficient, through Feral Rising, through the subsequent sequels, that by the end of publishing 4 books on my own, I will really understand this inside and out in a way that I didn't previously.
Yeah, one would hope, right?
I hope, yeah. Fake it until you make it, right?
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but you just threw a hell of a curveball at me when you talked about your former job, and I didn't even go down that path. So you're going to have to come back for another round, because that really piqued my interest about what you did in your former career. Yeah. That sounded really interesting. So we'll leave that as a teaser for the next time you
to
come
be continued.
Back. Yeah. So, you said you're going to be back to do your next book here. So maybe we'll follow up when was it Feral?
Feral Rising.
Feral Rising. When Feral Rising comes out, that's going to be. I love the ferals. I don't know, and there's something about feral that I kind of chuckle at because my son always used to say, "Oh my God, I'm going to go feral." Yeah. Like he used to say that all the time, and so that just makes me laugh when I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, all right. So how do people find you?
Yeah. So I have a website, michaelsolisauthor.com. At Writers and Books, we also have wab.org, soon to be writersandbooks.org, if you want to get involved in any of our creative writing activities and upcoming events. I'm also on social media, mainly as @MichaelSolisAuthor. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, whatnot, floating around on social media.
Awesome. So make sure, and all the links that you need are in the show notes, and they were just flashed on the screen and all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend you check out Deficient and by the time this comes out, I'm sure, I'm not sure, but I believe Deficient will already be out. I'm not really sure when this is going to post. This is a call back to my not being as organized as you. But I highly recommend it, and you're going to love it. And I'm looking forward to the next 3 and the next time you come back into studio. So thank you so much for braving the Rochester traffic to come out to beautiful downtown Bushnell's Basin.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. And
awesome.
Thanks for helping me record the book.
Yes. Looking forward to next time. All right. We'll see you next time. Positive blatherings. Stay good.
Outcast.com